more of like a conversation. Right now, just about, just like the statements of purpose and the resumes and other things that you need. It will be more like about reactive things. So I will make some slides in a presentation of things that are important, and then I will have Chris and Shannon kind of like react to those things. We might have like about maybe 5 minutes per piece. But then on the second part, which is gonna be at 10, what we're gonna do is like we're going to practice some of the things that we talked about. So all of you, I think that in there, we like create the resumes and statements of purpose and all that. So you will have like in front of you, what you have so far, right? What we also ask you for this, besides obviously, figuring out that you're an amazing student and, could get here, right? So then we will have like about 5 minutes of working through different things. And because there's so many of you, what we're gonna do is like, between us and also Presade, I think that you can also help out, and then Katie as well. We will tell you like 5 minutes to work on this, and then you can raise your hand if you have questions. Obviously, we also encourage you to like talk to others as well, to make it, it's kind of silent but interaction, kind of workshopping. So, and then it's next steps. So some of you have asked about the next steps. This is not the end. We need for you to apply. So we're gonna get you prepared to like webinars and like mentorship and all that. All right, so it's like the three of us here. Think that you know me, and I'm sure that you know Shannon. So maybe like Chris, how about you like introduce yourself to the group?
Okay. Howdy. You got it. Hey. Welcome. Good morning. My name is Dr. Chris Hunter. I'm an associate professor of practice here in the Department of Architecture and the director of the Master of Architecture and Career Change program is here. So, welcome.
Right. Well, thank you. So we will go through all of these, and again, we'll have like about 5 minutes to talk about all these things. So some of these things might not need that much like elaboration, but we'll look at like what the stamps that you might need, transcripts, statement of purpose, the resume, CVs, portfolios, letter of recommendation, and writing samples. I'll go quickly through the stamp and transcript and see if you have anything to add, but then the other ones I think that it might take a little bit more of time for this. So for the exams, it is not really required, right, for the programs to have like the GRE or the GMAT. So this, I think that this is like a vestige of like people do not get to do the exam during COVID. So then we figure that we will start accepting applications without it, the GRE and the GMAT. But that people can still submit them, right? If they want to. And also this is like maybe something I would say is kind of a little bit strange. Like some professors might still like to see some of the GRE and GMAT as well. So it's like we kind of like encourage you to do it, but it's not a requirement. So that's kind of like what I have to say about that. And then yes.
Okay, so yes, the GRE in particular, I'm one who I find the GRE useful to review, but I also recognize that a GRE is not necessarily the best indicator of how successful you will be as a student. What I have learned in my 20 years of doing admissions is that a good GRE indicates an intelligent student, but not necessarily one that works hard or that is going to be successful. What I also know is that a bad GRE is not an indicator that a student is not bright or intelligent. And I know that sounds weird. Why would you look at them at all? But there are pieces of the score that I find useful. I think especially at a PhD program, we'd like to see a high quantitative score. More important to me is the writing score. I really like to see the writing score because the writing, being a good writer is how academics make our living. We write. And I think I said this to the URSC PhD applicant or prospective students yesterday. Writing is thinking. And if you can't write about it, then you don't really understand it. So to me, good writing is a very strong indicator of success. So my advice to you is if you made a good score on your SAT or your whatever college entrance exam that you took, you're probably also going to get a strong score on the GRE. Especially in the US system, the SAT and the GRE are very similar. What I see is that if you got a good score in the SAT, you're also going to have a strong score on the GRE, and it will help you. Not having it won't hurt you, but having a strong score can help you, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I agree. I agree. Dr. Van Zandt, a little bit more experience in this than myself, but I do absolutely agree with the writing component, your ability to critically think, to string your ideas together, to present it to an audience that knows nothing about what you might be writing about. That is very important to me when I look at applications, how someone presents themselves within that context. So I just.
Well, thank you. So for the next exams are like the English proficiency exams, which are the TOEFL and the ELTS, right?
Yes.
So and then there's so minimum scores and all that. So the important thing to know about this is if you did your degree in another country, and there's also a list of some countries that might be exempt because their universities teach mainly in English, but that doesn't mean that if you went to, let's say, a lot of schools in Africa might also do that, but sometimes they don't count. So you have to look at the list of the countries and all that. But for the most part, if you went to just a degree that is not in the US, you choose to meet this. And also the other thing I would say about this is I personally took the TOEFL, even though I am from Puerto Rico. Even though Puerto Rico is exempt, I know that a lot of people are again in Puerto Rico as well. But I didn't want and for people to have any doubt that I could speak English very well. But again, it's not a requirement. But again, it's something that you can do if your primary language is not English. This is important also, especially for the teaching assistantships as well. They do require this because they need to demonstrate that you are proficient in English.
I think that what you said is right. I think for PhD applicants, if you don't have a degree from a North American English-speaking university, then you will be required to take those tests, and you do have to get a certain score to be able to teach. And for PhD students, that's very important. It's less important for master's.
Yeah, but all of you are getting or most of you, I would say, are getting a degree here in the United States. So this will not be very easy to you. All right, so for transcripts, I think that the general rule is you should submit all the transcripts that you have, even if you went to a community college and then you transfer into actually doing your bachelor's, right? Even though the final degree, it might be from a particular university, it's good to look at the trajectory as well of every single one. And then for international students, you need to have a particular certification that they do, right? Just to make sure that the transcripts are real and all that, because for us sometimes it's in the United States, it's hard to tell, right? So it's it's a little bit more of a process. The thing about the transcripts also and the exams is that it's good to do them ahead, and sometimes depending on the program they might allow, okay, I know that you do this, but then your university hasn't sent the transcript, but you cannot register for any classes if you don't do that, and there's a deadline for that. So it's very important that you do this on time, and they are sent they're not sent via mail. A lot of people ask can we send them via mail? It's there's you do it online, there might be like a process in where sometimes from some countries really has to be through mail. You have to work through admissions and it's just like a pain. But just like know that again, because of all that, we want you to do this like early. That's why you're here. I don't know if there's anything to add about something.
You want me to talk about what we look for on the transcripts?
Oh, yes, perfect.
Yeah, so what we look for with your transcripts, and we do look to see kind of what your overall GPA or grade point average is. Sometimes it's a struggle. We don't, a lot of universities, especially international universities, use a completely different scale than what we use in the United States. So it may not just be a 4.0 kind of grade. It may be on a 100 scale. But mainly what we're looking for is that you were consistent in your grades. I will also look to see where your low grades were, like what subjects there that some of your low grades were in, to get a sense of what you're good at and what you're less good at. And if you're getting low grades in something that doesn't relate to what we're gonna be asking you to do, then I don't care. But if you're struggling in some of your quantitative methods or in your GIS or in something that we are gonna use, then that's something that factors into our assessment of your life. Because what we're looking for is that you're likely to be successful in our program. And that it's a holistic review, so there's not one thing that is gonna determine that or not, but it's a lot of little things.
Right, yeah. The other thing is like if you have less than a 3.0, it is a problem to accept students. It's not like it's impossible, especially I see a lot of undergrads that want to get into a master's and at first like they were having a hard time, but then their grades got up better. And then we can advocate for you if this is the case. I don't think that for a PhD that might be something, very more stringent.
Yeah, I think we have control over it. Like
Yes.
we can accept students with lower than 3.0, but we have to know why. We have to know what it is about that student that we think is not accounted for in that GPA. I mean, just a quick personal story. My son, very bright kid, had almost a perfect score on his SAT, but he graduated with just under a 3.0. And I told him the whole 4 years, I'm like, you have to have 3.0, you have to have 3.0. But he's just one of those kids and he was also studying engineering, which is another thing. So I will look at what the undergraduate degree is in. And I know, at least coming out of our university, that it's really hard to get a good grade point average in engineering or in something that's very challenging. That's less hard in some other programs, but he did get into graduate school. He actually did get a scholarship too. So you can overcome that. And I have admitted students with under a 3.0.
For the PhD.
At least for the masters.
Yeah, me too. For the masters. And then again, not impossible, but then you have to like advocate. That's the thing.
You got
And
to
then
ask why.
Yeah, and then
Why did that happen?
The other thing is that you will not be able to graduate with a less than 3.0. I mean,
Here,
you
yes.
have like a C, you have to repeat that class basically.
In a required.
Yeah, you cannot graduate. So that's why the 3.0 is kind of like, it's like talking about future success. Chris, anything to add about this?
I think my experience has been more from the master's level, but the datum here is when we look at students that are trying to get into our master's of architecture program. We are, for me, I'm looking at similar to what you were talking about here. How they do in design studios? How they do in that context? That is a major indicator for me on how a person could be successful here. And it may lean towards GPAs, it may not. But a person that has consistently good grades in a design studio, which is basically work-based, is what drives my decisions on thinking whether this person can be successful in our program or not. As it rises up to a research level, then again, simply what Dr. Van just said, you gotta tell us why. And that goes back to writing, being able to articulate your story and let us know what it is that your experience here that gets us to some kind of decision for you.
All right, excellent. So with that, lead with your story. We're gonna talk about the statement of purpose, and there's like a few things here that I will mention, and then I will throw it back at you. So the first thing is like open with your why. So lead with a specific moment. a question that makes you want to pursue graduate work. So it's something that is not a generic biography, but it's like, again, the why. And then later on, like when we are like in our groups, I give you 5 minutes, I will show an example, and the example will be from you guys. So good examples I found, okay? Then we have like the show feed. So names. So talking about like the two, like I would usually suggest 3 faculty, maybe you have like some other, sometimes it's too few and too many. You know, and then like how your research like connects to your interests and explain why. And obviously, and all of these, like I'm concentrating a little bit more on the PhD because there's some bias here. That's why I said research. The other thing is like sometimes like in all of these, I concentrate a little bit also more in the research because like even if you're like a master's student, if you want to get job as an RA, which is kind of like what you get paid, it is always like a good idea to kind of like emphasize the research part. So like that's kind of like what you get employed in. However, you can always like, again, talk about faculty that relates to your interest, right? So you can change the research for your general interest if it's like for the master's. Be specific about a method. So which kind of research questions interest you and how would you like to approach them? And here again, like if you're looking for a master's, there might be something maybe you like GIS, right? And you want to like emphasize that, or maybe it's just like you really enjoy to like sketch manually, or you're very good at a particular software, right? So how do you approach that? It could be that you're really good at conversations, right? And you like community engagement. That's kind of like part of your method, or like interviews and all that. And then the third thing is like share your story with of your past. So it's like, we don't want like a disjointed story. Like I did this, I did this, I did this, I did that, but there's not like an arc. So think about like how to tell your story with like what were the pivotal moments, like why were you doing what you were doing, make something being coherent. I know sometimes our lives are completely incoherent, right? And then we kind of like rationalize. You know, all that, but remember, you have like only a few pages to tell the story. It needs to have like an arc. Think of yourself as you're like the hero, right? You're going through a past, and you have like to show like, you know, in very succinct that like, you know, character that you're like sucked in. I know that when you go in Netflix, you're like, if you're not sucked in the first 3 or 5 minutes, you're gonna be like, I don't want to watch this movie. So don't, you know what I mean? So that's important. And then the other thing is to revise ruthlessly. So it's kind of like, there's a lot of vacuum stuff, like things that don't need to be there. And we don't want like a long statement that is like ranting and this and that. And the most important thing is like, we don't want to read something is generic. We're like, okay, so Esther wrote this, but then, you know, Fernanda wrote exactly the same thing, and then it doesn't have like anything kind of like personal or interested, or it's something super generic, like I want to go to Tamil because it's a stop state university. It's like you could change Texas A&M and put like University of Illinois, and then, you know, write your statement and boom, and you're like, this is kind of like not necessarily talking about us. This could be like a generic thing, and that's like where you can think about editing. So I'll throw it back at you with like a statement of purpose, and maybe talk about it like for 6 minutes or so.
Want me to start? All right, so I think this is great advice. I mean, I totally agree with everything that Dr. Garcia has said. A couple of things I want to emphasize. One is, especially for PhD students, the names of the faculty are important. In fact, for the URSC program, we actually have kind of a screening sheet that we assign points for different things that we see in the application, and one of them is that they name faculty explicitly. And so if you don't name faculty explicitly, you're going to lose that point, which there are other points, so it's not the end of the world, but it's a point you're giving up and that you don't want to give up. And remember, these are people that you think you might want to work with. They don't have to be the one person that you can only work with. It's nice to identify more than one person, because not every faculty member is accepting new students. And so you don't want to count on that one person being your person. You want to give some more chances. The length, I think, is something Dr. Garcia did not talk about, but she mentioned that it needs to be concise. 2 to 3 pages, that's it. I don't want it to be longer than 3 pages. I'm not gonna read longer than 3 pages. And then in terms of the why and your story, I see a lot of statements that start with like your experience in the city as a child. And that's, I think for a lot of you, especially those of you who are coming from other countries, are coming from more disadvantaged places, that can be very compelling, if indeed that is why you wanted to get into urban planning or something like that, because of your experience in your own community. What was it about that experience that made you want to learn how to make it better, or how to expand on it, or address environmental problems or social problems or economic problems? That's good. The last thing is, you know, with AI, it's very helpful. I know we're finding it very helpful as well. We're all learning how to use it appropriately. But I will say, I've seen a lot of letters that look very similar to one another. And I may not be able to look at one letter and say, well, this was definitely generated by AI. But if I start to get a bunch of them that look really similar, then it's less personal and it's less meaningful, because it's not them, it's not their writing. I mean, you can use AI interactively with yourself to tell it what you want to say, and it will help you say it better, but you can't just let it determine what you should say for you. You have to be the master of that tool, and we need to be able to see it in your writing.
In architecture, well, this is in general, all of this. For me, the biggest point on here is number one, why. That's, for me, that's the number one thing. It's Dr. Garcia had the analogy here of the Netflix or the movie, or yeah, if the movie isn't breaking it down for me in the first couple of minutes, I'm changing the channel. Okay, I want to know why you want to come, why you want to do this, and why you want to come here, which then adds a little bit of depth to, from my perspective, you putting in the time in telling us specifically and uniquely to us why you want to come here. Okay, that begins to separate AI from anything else. Give us the investment of your time to tell us why you want to come here. Otherwise, go somewhere else. Okay, your story, I do like to read that. Okay, I'm not saying that nobody else doesn't. I want to know who I'm talking to, who I'm reading, who I'm finding out. And with regards to any kind of research with an architectural context, those become for me, the points that can be tied together towards why and what your research question is going to be. I'm serving on a committee right now for a PhD student who's trying to develop her question on, or her research question on understanding and developing ideas for housing, manufactured housing that can be respectful to the Maasai people in Kenya. And so that is something that, okay, it's kind of broad, and I'm starting to get into the specifics here of how can we get this thing a lot tighter. Tell me why you're doing this. Tell me what its research value is going to be to the body of knowledge in architecture. So tell us what it is you wanted to do, why you want to do it, and why you want to do it here. Okay. Don't give me an AI. Don't give us an AI response here. Give us the benefit of your investment in time.
Right. That's excellent. Yeah.
What do you do? Like, be specific. What if you don't really know completely yet? So I'm thinking back to when I was starting grad school, and I mean, I had something that interested me, but I didn't know what a research question really was. I don't know that I would have been able to say like how I would approach a research question. How do you, if you're still, you know, maybe like thinking back for me, or the example you just gave, I know I want to do something with the Maasai community in Kenya. I want to do something about housing. What level of specificity is sort of realistic for an incoming?
That's a great question. And I know I was talking to somebody yesterday. We don't expect you to know what your research question is. In fact, we don't really want you to be super specific about the research question, because You're wrong, yes. It will change, I guarantee it, it will
Yeah.
change over the course, and we want you to be open enough to learning something new when you get there. We don't want you to know if you don't know everything right now. I don't know everything right now. And I learn new things every day. We want you to be open to learning, but we want to know, like, what motivated you to come do this degree? Like, why are you here? Because fit is very important to us, and it's fit not only with our program and our faculty. Can we give you what, and it's as much about what you can give as what we can give. We want you to come here if we can provide to you what you want out of a PhD. We may not be the best place. We don't have people who do everything. We have a lot of people who do a few things very, very well. And we want to see that that you're going to benefit from spending time with us, and that we're going to benefit from spending time with you. That you have an experience, that you have professional knowledge. I was talking to Esther, who's a working planner. That's great to have professional experience, whether it's in architecture or whether it's in planning or whatever it's in, especially graduate programs, even whether it's the master's or the PhD. Because having professional experience tells us that you've thought about this. Like, you've been out there and you've seen stuff, and you know something about what works and what doesn't work, and what we need to learn how to do better. But also that you're coming back to school because you want to, not just because it's the next step in delaying real life. Because for a lot of people, it is, trust me. Especially for middle-class Americans, it's like they're trying to delay the inevitable of having to get a job, and so they just stay in school. And I was probably guilty of that to a certain extent as well. But people who've been out and you're working and you're giving up something to come back to school, you've got to really want it. And that's an appealing thing, is because when we have we have a lot of students who are just coming through out of school, but when we have mature students who are in their mid to late 20s or even 30s, and sometimes 40s or 50s, I've often had students older than me, including that one. It's because you really want it, and there's something about this that suits your needs. So you want to be as specific as you can, so that we know that you fit, but not so specific that your mind can't be changed about how or what you want to do.
And as a point to what Dr. Reed brought up, as a point of clarification, if you don't have a specific idea of what you wanted to do, the process of trying to get there can be just as important. Okay, well, I'm not specifically sure about what that question is going to read, but I have an interest in this. When I was applying, I did my grad work here, both master's and PhD, and my application read, I was interested in looking at research of forward and future thinking modes of construction design for architecture. My thesis, and
Totally different.
Dr. Brezet was the best professors I ever had in teaching, was it housing? Yes, and I loved it. My research questions and my degrees for master's and PhD is focused on the sociocultural influences of the design and construction of African-American church houses built from the 18th century to the 1920s. Star Trek, it is not. Okay. It completely changed, mainly because when I got here and I got the committee chair that worked with me, master's and PhD level, and then being around faculty here that offered a lot of things that were interesting to me in my professional career, and I practiced over 30 years in Dallas at various architecture firms. She's absolutely right. I got down here and I go, I'm not gonna be one of those persons that, all my dissertation and I got my classes, ABD, that, no. What would I be doing in an office at 3:05 in the afternoon on a Tuesday, working? So I turned this into a working experience. 5 years, got both degrees and got out. Okay, so Dr. Brezet is absolutely right. You gotta want it. Because that's 5 years out of my life I could have been added towards retirement. Okay, adding more cash. I wanted to get in this environment. So You can have a specific idea, then again, you may not, but the process of helping you get to that question is what we can help you accomplish.
Excellent. So we'll go with like the resume or CV. Again, I don't necessarily agree with this first statement that is like tailored to academia, but I feel that this is true for most academics that are thinking about the PhD. So kind of like putting your education first and all that, and certainly for us, that's the first thing that you put in your CV, right? Your education. I personally like to see like work experience as well. And I think that is because like, a lot of like, I like community engagement and like having people like, you know, if they work, I have a student right now, that work for a program that I'm studying. So I'm like, ooh, that's like super interesting because I want to learn about the practice, right? And someone that can help me with that part, because personally, maybe I haven't experienced, having the opportunity to work, with like one of those programs. So that's kind of like one of the first things. Again, you might agree or disagree, but it says like emphasize research publications, awards, relevant coursework. So it's kind of like tailored to academia. And again, these things might change master's, PhD, but in general, this applies the same thing that I said of like maybe you want to find a job with as a research assistant. Quantify your impact. So this is like true for all resumes or CVs. Like instead of like saying, I assisted with research, I did this. It's like I coded like, I did the survey and collected 2,000, you know, or I did like the coded, just like interviews and transcribe them and this many for this project. So it's like think about some numbers that you can add. And then, because like numbers tend to stand out just in general in CVs or resumes. And maybe we can also talk about the difference of resume and CV. I will let them talk about that. But highlight the skills. So it's like statistical software, design tools, any field work, grant writing, like anything that it could be again useful for academia, especially for like research positions, right? But it could be also, I see a lot of like people with teaching, especially from international countries, like they already have been instructors, or some of them are already professors in their own given country, right? So that definitely stands out as well. Keep the formatting like clean. So obviously some of you are into design, but I think that obviously it can be a turn off to see something that is like not very nicely organized, or something that has typos. It's like this person doesn't pay attention to detail, obviously, right? So it's like things like that are you need to like proofread it, send it to people, and so on. All right, anything to add about, maybe start with resume, CV?
Sure. So yeah, most of you are probably familiar with a regular job resume, where that is, you know, one page. It shows your work experience, it shows your education, it shows any kind of extracurricular or volunteer work that you had. It's very concise. It's all on one page. A CV or a curriculum vitae is like, I think it's like the coursework of your life, basically. Is what kind of what it means, but that's an academic version. It's way longer typically. I mean, y'all's isn't going to be long at this point, but it will get very long because it's not, we don't just list our jobs. I don't just have listed that I'm a professor. I have every publication on that I've ever written. I have every presentation that I've ever done. I have every guest speaking, every poster I've ever made, every journal I've ever reviewed for. Actually, I forget now, so there's lots of stuff that's not on there. But I think, yeah, I mean, Evis has more publications than I do, so hers is probably longer, but you know, I think mine is like 30 pages or something at this point. Yours is probably there too. And it's not a question of how long is it? It's a lot more of like each project that you've worked on, and especially if you have, you know, if you've worked in an office, whether it's a design office or a public office or government office, you may have had projects that you've worked on. So list those projects. Let us see what kinds of things, you know, do you have project management experience? Do you have implementation, community engagement types experience? List those things. You're not limited to one page for this resume. You can have it be longer, but don't make it longer than it needs to be. It's not a contest. I did want to say something about publications, because I know if you're applying to a PhD program, you may have some publications already, and if you do, that's great. If you don't worry about it. There is no expectation that you already have publications when you're coming into a PhD program. Now, I do see that a lot, particularly from some countries that have a culture of publishing, and are doing a lot of quantitative data analysis. They may have more. I'm at a point where that doesn't impress me at this point, because it actually makes me skeptical. There's no reason someone who doesn't have a PhD would be publishing. Now, I worked with a professor as a master's student, and I had a publication. I was third author as a research assistant. That's great. You know, that was my first publication. It was years before I had another one. But don't worry about not having any publications yet. Now, if you've got publications in your home country, or you have kind of magazine publications or things that aren't in peer-reviewed journals, list those too, because it shows us that you have some writing skills, that you're able to think about how to put things in a package. But if you don't have publications, please don't feel like that's a necessity, because it's not. It's not even for junior faculty, although it almost feels like it is at this point.
Yeah, and then I know that Maya has a question, but she's also interested in architecture, so maybe you ask your question and maybe Chris can lead you.
Yeah, I was just curious about the relevant coursework. Does that entail like a specific like class you've taken that could be relevant, or like a specific project you did in a class? Like, I was wondering if you could go into a little bit more depth about that, and then also like, just to clarify, like, would that only go on the CV and on a resume necessarily?
That would tie to transcript.
Well, I think, yeah, I mean, I see a lot of people list individual classes on their resume or their CV, but mainly a resume. If you have classwork that is outside of the core courses that represents particular skills that you have, like if you took a GIS class, especially as an architect, you know, that would be out of the realm of what you normally would be expected to do. But if you've got Rhino, or you've got, you know, different softwares, usually that would be listed as a skill and not as coursework. But I think projects and specialized coursework, you can do just little bullet points kind of under your education section is a good place for that. It's really speaking to what Dr. Garcia talked about, is what skills do you have that might be useful to us? Because if I'm hiring someone as a research assistant, I'm usually looking for specific skills. You don't know what it is, because I may need a Spanish speaker, or I may need a GIS person, because neither of those things can I do, right? So I'm looking for people who can do the things that I can't do. And a lot of you have technical skills that I don't have because of how old I am. And so those things can be really helpful, but you never know what someone's looking for. So you know, it may be that I don't need a GIS person, but I do need a Spanish speaker, or I need someone who can do interviews. Those are, you know, you're going to have different skills. Some of you have highly technical skills, others of you have more soft skills related to qualitative research. I need both of those depending on the project, and so that's kind of what you want to highlight.
I have both, a resume, a professional resume, and a CV, and I think I'm sitting at 22, 23 pages now, but a lot of mine, in the structure of teaching, research, and service, a lot of mine, since the majority of my career has been professional, I listed the firms I worked at, the projects I worked on, what my role was on those projects. So expressing to someone, well, I was a project architect on a $60 million project, or a project manager on a $75 million project, that kind of thing, listing my work experience, because coming into grad school, there was almost a 30-year gap from when I graduated from undergrad to coming here. So I had no publications. I had none of that stuff. All I had was my work experience, and I still highlight that on the CV, because it does lead into the teaching experience and research, and I've had the opportunity to really get into writing, publication, all this, all this. But you're trying to ensure that, again, be very focused on just specifics with the resume versus, yeah, your CV is like, well, you did this, you did that, that kind of stuff. There's an order to it as well, and something that something you said, I want to kind of trigger something with me from architecture. If you are have worked on a project that in which it's a team-based project, you need to tell us what the project was, what the what the intent was, and what your specific role was on that project. Okay, a lot of times, and this happens on a very regular basis. We're looking at a portfolio. It's a wonderful project that the student's presenting, and the student worked with 3 other people, and we have absolutely no idea what this particular candidate did on this project. Okay, which can be in a misleading kind of a, what was done, what did you do? It looks great, but we need to know what your role was. Be specific and tell us if it's a team project, what you did on that project, whether it's an academic project or if you're in the workplace.
So we're gonna go to portfolios. We're gonna mostly rely on Chris on this, but I have a few points here. So the first one is like the curate and do not dump. Don't put everything. This is also true for, I guess, resumes, but just like select what are your strongest projects. So it's just best quality. And this is true in general, right? So, and then tell the story of each project. So include like the program, the process. I think that's like also like kind of cool when I see usually these things like in design and what is like the outcome. Show like range and relevance. So it's like use like mixed scales and media. So you could have like site plans and renderings, modeling, diagrams, community work, and so on. Then the design is very important, obviously, for portfolios, like the layout, readable fonts, the logical flow, right, and the hierarchy, all of that. And obviously make it easy to access. Students try to upload something that is too big in our system. So just again, make sure that everything is like looking good in PDF and so on. The one thing I will say is like we don't require portfolios for example, for the urban planning, and there's no place to upload it actually. So just a lot of the students, there's a large percentage that come from architecture. They just like send us the file and we will attach it to the application. But obviously in architecture, landscape architecture, they require you to do a portfolio. I believe that in landscape architecture, when you go to their page, there's also an example of a portfolio for non-designers. People could add like photographs or things like that, because in the landscape architecture, it's like 3 years if you maybe don't have like the design background. But if you have a design background, it's 2 years. So I'm just saying that, even though they ask you for a portfolio, don't be discouraged and like, oh, I don't have like a portfolio. There's still opportunities for you to get into that program. I believe for architecture is definitely a must, but let's hear portfolios.
I have nothing to say.
Okay, you can see this.
Oh,
Yes.
for me, the number one thing is design the portfolio. Don't take project A, project B, project C, project D, dump it on a white background and call it a day. Okay, they could be AIA gold medal winning designs, but if you're presenting it on the lid of a trash can, it's not going to help. I stole that from the Cosby Show, so. But Cosby was right. Okay. Don't. Yes. Yeah, that one. Yes. Okay. Full disclosure. Present your work. Just take the exercise and time to design the portfolio so that it supports and presents your work in the best light possible. Okay, which means again, take the time. And I'll talk a little bit about some of this stuff. Tell the story of the project. Don't go into okay, on week 7 we did this, and week 9 we don't need to know that. But tell us, to show the story, show the project. What it was, maybe what studio, instructor, your name, that kind of thing. It's team, that's your team members. and then tell us, what you did on that project, okay? Again, be very, specific and be very detail oriented when you're putting this together. Things like pixelation, distortions of color, inability to read text. I mean, I'm not in spring chicken here, okay? I don't want to try to read what you got here and then discover that the pixelation has distorted the text. Okay, so make sure that the quality of the information that you are presenting can be read, can be understood. It's professional work in which you're telling a professional story. So make sure that you go general to specifics and again, and listing of what you can do, resumes, the CVs, that kind of thing. If you're if you've got skills in Rhino and in Revit, and then AI, Midjourney, Twinmotion, all those kinds of things, let us know. Show your work in the best way possible, but organize it all in a portfolio. Then design the stage that the actors will play.
I just want to add something too. If you're applying for the Master of Urban Planning or the PhD in Urban and Regional Sciences, you do not need a design portfolio. And in fact, I would kind of discourage it because what it communicates to me is that you don't recognize that these are non-design degrees. And so that tells, at least in my mind, and other people may feel differently, but it tells me that you may not understand what you're going to get in our program. And it happens a lot. I see a lot of applications, and particularly for the MUP, that they probably really want an urban design degree or an architecture degree. And we don't provide that. So it's not that you're not a good student or that I don't like what you have, that we can't meet that need, right? That's not something that we do here. Now that's not to say that we have landscape architecture in our same department, and there are some opportunities there if you have design interests, but that's not going to get you into the program. That may be something that you can take advantage of while you're here, but it's not going to encourage us to advance.
So we are,
Marcelina has a question.
oh,
I have a question based on that. That's a background in architecture, like listed in my CV, either in undergrad and like years of working experience affect on my application for urban and regional.
That's positive. Like your work experience is positive, but I don't need to see your design portfolio. I would like to see a list of the projects that you worked on and what you did for them. And then I would want to see in your written statement why you're moving from a design-based profession into a research area. And why urban and regional science is appropriate versus architecture or something like that.
I mean, I'm already
In planning.
planning.
Okay, well, that will help then. I mean, just don't, yes, we want to see the work experience. We don't necessarily need to see the design.
and we have like two more things, which is letter recommendation and writing samples. We are over time, but we will like talk about these, and then we will kind of like workshop probably just the statement of purpose, because we will not have time to workshop the rest of it, right? But let's go with letters of recommendation. So I think for this is I choose wisely, be recommenders that know your work well, right? We in this case, because there's like especially for the PhD, we want to see academic professors. I would recommend to have at least two. If you have work experience, maybe that's one. For the other if you're moving from undergrad to masters, you probably have also two and then one, right? But just like think about like how they come together, talk about your story, and perhaps use the opportunity for them to confirm some of the things that you have said in the statement of purpose or you have in your resume. So it's more like a checkpoint of validation. But also your statement of purpose might be only 2 pages. They can add more things and details that are not in your statement of purpose, right? So think about your letters like comprehensively, like what are this person can say about me, this one and this one. For that, you need to actually ask people or give people details. I get a lot of like students that they just like, oh, send me a letter of recommendation, and then, you know, they took a class with me, but they didn't, like, sometimes it's a long time later, you know, or something like that. It's like, they don't say which class and what they did, and things like that. So help me out, right, with like some of these like, letters, right? If it's like, again, for a PhD, I recommend like someone that really knows you, maybe someone that you did a project with, or a little bit more than just like took a class, right? And again, just like, don't think about, okay, I need someone that is a big name or something like that. That doesn't matter. What it matters is that the person knows you, but it's not obviously your friend, right? So I think that that's like the important thing here. And then, ask early, this is very important. Then, because your application will be incomplete without your 3 letters of recommendation. So it means that we will get everything, and we will be able to see that you need your letters, especially for the PhD program, by December 1st, right? They need to be there. In the system, you can send people reminders and all that, but this means that you should plan way in advance of what you're gonna ask for. And for all of you, we did get some names of people, so we are already like thinking about it. So that's like, great, but you again need to ask them and provide them with your statement of purpose and with your CV, right? I get a lot of students also asking, oh, I want to apply for this PhD, but then they don't have like, okay, where's your statement of purpose? What do you want to do, or anything like that? And then what else? So yeah, I guess it's just providing online, or we already talked about the diversity of academic, maybe. Sometimes I see a lot of people do like volunteer work. I think that that's good, as well. Like if you work with an organization, if it's for your PhD, if particularly you have done research with that organization, and it's kind of like a community partner, you want to do like community engaged research, that's awesome. But again, like if you are more like moving to a master's, I think that anything that shows that you are a person oriented towards like service, it could be like something good as well. And obviously just follow or say thank you, right? And the other thing is, like, if you want to apply for several programs, right, you could use the same recommenders. But just like make sure that you follow up with them, that you're clear with them. Tell them your plan. So if you are applying, let's say, to 6 schools, say, you know, write a letter saying like, I am planning to apply to X, Y, and Z. Sometimes it's like all of a sudden you get like a thing from a student, they didn't even tell you that they were applying, and they're like, oh, you're my recommender, now you're, you know, send me a letter to the Arizona State University, and I just didn't even know that you were applying.
Please check with them before you list their name, like let them know or ask them if they're willing to be a recommender for you. Even better is to say, would you be willing to write a strong recommendation for me for these 4 programs? At least 2 weeks before the deadline, and preferably longer.
Yes,
Oh, yeah, you want me to, you want somebody? Yeah, what Chris is whispering over here to me is, have I ever had a situation in which, as a student, did ask, like, sometimes faculty will put it back on you and say, well, you draft it for me and I'll sign it. That's not a good sign. If that happened to you, and I had a professor like this, actually, he was like, you write it and I'll sign it. And on one hand, you know, it's nice that you can provide the detail for the letter, but that's a sign that they are not really engaged in your future, and that they're not gonna write something for you that is personal from their experience with you. I would probably walk away from that. Like, I wouldn't use that recommendation. I would say, that's okay, thanks. And just go to someone else who is willing to take the time to write for you. Now, I mean, we could get into a whole thing about who writes letters and who doesn't. There are faculty out there who are very generous with their time. I think the 3 of us are among those people. I have written literally hundreds of recommendation letters. And then there are people out there who are not generous with their time and they don't want to take their time to do something for you. And you're gonna meet a lot of both of those kinds of people. Stick with the generous ones.
And then do you want to add this, because they ask like, is it, like the recommender, the student doesn't see the recommendation, right? Like in the system, you can mark this or that. What do you think about, admissions and like?
The
That's-
standard is to waive your right to see the recommendation. And the reason for that is that it gives the recommender the freedom to say what they really believe. When a faculty member thinks that the student might see the letter, they're gonna be a lot more measured. And they will generally be positive, but it might be a weak positive. And those of us who've read a lot of letters can identify what a weak positive letter looks like. I've written weak positive letters, in fact, because if some students that come to me, like Eva said, I don't remember them. I don't have something, and I try to remember all of them, but it's a long time. And sometimes I don't. And if I don't have detail, because I want to give detail, like a good recommender wants to give as much detail about you as they can. They want to give examples of a project that you did in class or some extra mile thing that you did outside of class where you were involved in a service learning project or something like that. And if the person doesn't have those details, then you just go, well, they got an A in my class or they got a B+ in my class, and and it's like, okay, I can see that on the transcript. They're not adding anything that I don't already know about you. So you want to try to find people like Dr. Christina was saying. It's much better to have a faculty member who knows you well and is not a big name than a big name who doesn't know you well. And I know it's tempting to take the big name, but big name people they get a lot of requests, and they're often people, because there's always a trade-off between being famous and paying attention. I'm going to use churches as an example, like ministers, pastors. They're great orators, but they're not always great one-on-one, which is unfortunate because they're asked to do a lot of one-on-one things. But you can be good at one, and it's hard to be good at both. And so it's for a recommender, you want that person who's really taken the time with you, that can offer good insight into your likelihood of success.
Yeah.
Generosity here is one that you want to have somebody that is vested in your future. I wrote a bunch of letters of recommendations from students that I've had in studios, and then as I'm looking through the various requests, I discovered that some of these students are applying to the same schools. So I go, I gotta get a little bit more specific, because in all likelihood, it's going to be the same group of people looking at 4 letters I may have written for 4 of my students who are applying to that same school. So the first thing I do is I need your resume. I don't go anywhere without that. Once a student sends a resume, then I can craft the letter of recommendation to be a little bit more specific. And I need things to trigger my mind. Okay, this was a couple years ago, there you go. Oh, okay, I remember. I'll even pull the project up to remind me of the challenges and the positives that student may have had. And I do want to have that freedom to be able to say, this person struggled out the gate, but came up with a fantastic project in the end.
And that's a great kind of thing to be able to say, is to show progress, because a lot of what we look for is people who are making progress. Having a weak student that comes into your class and leaves a strong student is the most rewarding thing that happens to faculty member.
Excellent. So I think that this is the last thing here, which is the writing samples. And then so I know that Dr. Van Sant talked about the peer review publications, and then I think that if you don't necessarily have to have one as a PhD a student, but if you do have one that is like first author, I mean, that would be kind of like rare, right? But that could be something that it could be in the writing sample. Mostly I see like, the student like thesis or professional papers, something that you outdoor yourself. Because sometimes like if you have a publication, again, if you said that you had one that you were their author, sometimes it's hard to tell, but then you have to say what you did in that project, if it was like data collection, the editing, all those things, right? But if it's like, if you have to like choose between like, it's two things, and then one doesn't show your writing, that's not good, that's not good. We need some sample that actually shows your writing, even if it's a paper that you wrote for class. I think that that's more important than you showing like two things, like, it's like, we don't know what you did on this, right? This is the writing sample, by the way, this is just for the PhD students, so for the other folks, you know, this is not applicable to you. And then the other thing is like, I mean, you could send the whole master thesis, but I also recommend you to think about, is there like something particularly strong, like let's a chapter that is like really good or something, that again, you want to like showcase. So I think that goes back to the quality versus like quantity kind of things. Then we have like the, again, it could be a paper that you did for a class. It cannot be just like it's a literature review and then you just say stuff. It has to be like you're making an argument and it's like an interesting argument, right? So that's kind of like we want you to show out your critical thinking, and or if you use your methods, then we want to like see that in action. It could be a technical report, a white paper, a policy brief. This might be also like if you have work experience, you might already have some of these. Sometimes it could be like a grant proposal, like if you like did something and you like got some money, or maybe, you know, that could be like, again, an example. I would say do not send like blog posts, op-eds, or design portfolios. Like again, like if you're going on PhD and if they ask for two writing samples, the portfolio is not a writing sample. Just make sure that is, again, you could submit your portfolio, but again, that goes back to what Dr. Gonzalez was saying. We need your writing samples. And I think that's it. Any other thoughts about the writing samples?
Those are all good. I agree.
Okay, yeah, ditto, all right. So, it's like 10:20, and then we're gonna like workshop really, and again, we have like, Channel and Chris are gonna, you know, they're our guests, but I can also help, like, so we're gonna at least like give you your statement of purpose and resume. At this point, we don't have time to work towards the resume, but we'll think about the statement of purpose. And then there's me and Katie and Criseda, who potentially, if we have like several hands, we can like help you through all of this. So I will give you about like 5 minutes to just like again, just think about it, right? So think about it, ask questions, and then we can move on. I will give you like a prompt, so it will be something like this, like open with your why. And we have like here, for example, I will also use like justice. So it's like, I was 15 when our house was engulfed by fire. The fire service could not help. We live in a slum with poor accessibility. I decided then to devote my life to safer communities. That's a very strong why. And then you can read all of these. We have someone similar for Monaja. This goes to what you were talking about, is like, but it's a very strong image, just talking about like, I watch children search through roadside trash bins and for discarded materials, sometimes shelter. That construct made me question how a city can grow so fast while leaving so many behind. These are very strong imagery, right? And there's specific questions, kind of like interest, and it captures your attention. So what we're gonna do is like go through some of these in 5 minutes. So I'm not gonna go through all the details. You just can read this on your own, but I want you to think about it and then ask questions of us. Raise your hand and we will help you. I wanted to see, because we have like the statement.
Yeah, so I